Let me just introduce Michael Levine to you very briefly, and then Michael will introduce his panel. Can I just remind you that we are seeking any questions from you using the hashtag that I identified at the start of the session, so please do that for us and send those through. Michael is, as you know, Chief Knowledge Officer at Sesame Workshop. Michael, it's great to have you in the moderator role. People will know that Michael himself is a child development and early learning expert, but also very active in social policy. Has, of course, a background with Asia Society, with Carnegie, with New York City Schools. Quite a remarkable person in his own right. So, Michael, thank you, and it's over to you to introduce your remarkable panel.
This is fun. Hello. I wish I had bubble gum. This is all planned out. How's it going so far? Hi, good morning. Such a pleasure to be here. Can I just reiterate Tony's initial comments about Lynn Kagan? She is a national treasure. She has, for 30 years that I've known him, has maintained not only her creativity, her inventiveness, also her planned urgency. And this is just, I don't mean to embarrass you, Lynn. We got to know each other when you designed the first universal pre-K program for the United States in New York City, which, of course, the current mayor has no recollection of. But it's just a total, complete privilege to be here. So you have already heard from my colleagues, our colleagues from Hong Kong and Finland, and we have a chance to include them with two wonderful national and international experts, Linda Smith and Caridad Araujo. I almost got that right, from the Inter-American Bank and from the Bipartisan Policy Center. So I wanted to just remember the wonderful slide that Lynn showed about this very robust Chapter 3 in the Early Advantage. We're going to be spending 32 and a half minutes focusing on comprehensive services, finance and governance. That in itself is a nightmare, a little bit of a mouthful and a little bit of a nightmare to think about in 32 and a half minutes. But I wanted to just share 6 of the takeaways from the country study. Some of these are in your package, but I think it's sort of useful to nest this conversation. So, number 1, in thinking about comprehensive CED services, the study found that there are robust but different services. All of the study countries offer comprehensive services that, and this is important, far exceed the United States. But they differ in what they offer, and understandably given the importance of context. Second, there's a robust conversation in the book about policy interaction and the ways in which policies are fine-tuned in the different countries. So what these study countries offer is contingent deliberately on other services. So a study country with moderate family leave benefits, for example, might have robust childcare funding for infants and toddlers. That would be the South Korea case. While a country with rich family and child support benefits may have families who use formal childcare in the early years less frequently, as in Finland. Finance. So we've all talked about the hybridization of funding and delivery patterns. So all of the countries do rely on both public and private. On the private side, mostly parental fees, although a few countries do provide 100% public financing for certain age groups or subsets. This notion of progressive universalism, which I think is quite interesting and quite relevant to the US context. All the study countries provide resources for all children. Really, this notion of no one being left out is a very important one for us to think about. But most provide additional targeted support for needy populations. And then on the governance side, I would just mention 2 quick things. One, this is an interesting comment given what Kathy just said. Stable governance and strong EC support. All the study countries have comparatively stable governments. Do we? And provide strong support for ECUC with increasing attention in recent decades based on the emerging scientific and economic long-term benefit cases. And then lastly, and I think this is one that's very interesting for us to think about here in the US, there are different approaches to achieve systemic coherence. The study countries use both functional and structural means to make their EC systems somewhat or largely coherent, and are working to achieve alignment among related services in health, education, and social welfare. Okay, so those are the takeaways, the key takeaways from this lovely, important book. And now I want to get first the country perspectives and then the global sort of expert perspective on the table. So I'm going to start with Kristiina and Nirmala. You both have sort of talked a little bit about some of the more or less profound changes in the CUC services that have taken place over the last several years in Finland and Hong Kong. Nirmala, you began to talk about this long-term shift from demand to supply side. And it's just fascinating. Could you say a little bit more about why that shift from the pre-primary voucher scheme to the free quality kindergarten policy happened? What happened there?
Okay, at the outset, I should say that the Hong Kong government does not provide early childhood services. It's all outsourced to the private sector. But the territory has a very strong sense of social justice, at least evolving, and always felt that no child should be deprived of early childhood education because of the family's financial standing. So if you didn't earn a certain amount, the government will give you the money to get childcare services. So Hong Kong has universal access and has had universal access to early half-day early childhood education for the past 20 years for 3 to 6-year-olds. Okay? So this is because the government gives you money. Okay? They do not provide the service. They're not the providers, but it's in the private sector. But as Kathy mentioned, in the UK, we have a very strong inspection service. I'm sorry, it's going to take just a minute to explain this. So when the government will allow the private sector to operate the childcare centers and kindergartens, but they monitor them and they use carrots and sticks. If you don't meet their inspection standard, you will lose your license. And what the government has done in the past few years is they've increased the stringency of requirements. So, for example, our teacher-child ratio has gone from 1 to 21 to 1 to 10, okay? You meet the government benchmarks, otherwise you don't get the government money and you don't get your license. So I want to explain this first, okay? So with the change that happened, there was a lot of pressure on the government to start funding early childhood education for 3 to 6 years old, okay, for all families, not only for the ones who didn't have the money. So the government started a voucher, which is a non-means tested voucher that every child could get 15 hours of per week, right, 3 hours a day, of kindergarten. But only that voucher was only encashable in kindergartens that met the government's benchmark for quality. So this is how they're driving quality. But as I mentioned, what happened was middle-class families, they took the government's voucher, so they sent their kid in the morning to the government using the voucher, and in the afternoon they paid money and sent them to another private center. And this is not what we wanted. We want to not schoolify early childhood because Chinese value education. They want the child to do the primary 1 curriculum in kindergarten. So the government could not control it. So they, as a response to some of the criticisms, they moved from a totally demand-side strategy to a fully supply side strategy. Now the money goes to the kindergartens, and of course the kindergartens have to meet all the requirements, otherwise they won't get the money. So the quality assurance is still there, right? Or the monitoring is still there, but now sometimes we respect parents, we work together with parents, but sometimes we feel that parents may not act in ways that professionals think are in the best interest of children, because we think children should play, children should have joyful learning. But the parents are quite happy for the children to be overscheduled and spend 12 hours a day not playing and doing academic and writing things. So that's the...
Really fascinating. Kristiina, you hinted at a few changes that have recently occurred or things that you're looking towards in the future, whether it was issues that related to the compensation of the high quality workforce or the changing demands based on a more diverse set of families. Can you say a little bit about the evolving landscape, how things have changed and what you're looking for around services and financing in particular?
In Finland, sorry, this is okay. In Finland, the financing structure of early childhood education has not changed drastically over the years. What is currently under discussion is whether the early childhood education for 5 years old should be totally free to everybody. Currently, we offer totally free education for 6-year-olds and onwards. We feel that we want to encourage all children to take part in early childhood education now when they are 5 years old. In Finland, we have a very strong public financing overall for early childhood education. That means that if parents, for any reason, cannot pay for this fee for the services, the government, or actually the municipality, will compensate. So we have free education for any family who shows that they are unable to pay any fees. In Finland, municipalities are the education providers of education and healthcare services. So we have the government who gives funding to municipalities, and municipalities then govern their funding, and some of this funding is allocated to early childhood education services. So it is very hard during our study to identify any exact percentages, how much municipalities spend on early childhood education services, because this varies according to municipalities. To sum up, we have this type of perhaps a complicated structure, but we both have public funding, and we also invite parents to join in funding the ECEC services to the level they are able to. But for public early childhood center care, the maximum fee, for example, for parents, that is even kind of regulated by law, the maximum fee for public services, and it is less than, well, it is about $300 per month. And that includes full-time care and all the meals and snacks and breakfasts and everything. So you can hear the sum is not terribly big in any case. So practically in Finland, the services are kind of free.
There's a lot of folks in the...
Yeah.
People are jealous.
Yes, somebody's.
So before we turn to... Thank you. I want to get Linda and Caridad into the conversation just a minute. The concepts of, what do we call them, progressive universalism and responsive policymaking come out in the book. I wonder whether both of you could just comment on how you see that within Hong Kong and the Finnish context.
That was the title. That was the title of my chapter, Responsive Policymaking. So what I meant by responsive policymaking was that policymaking in Hong Kong was very tuned to the global context. Tony said last night, early childhood is front and center stage in all countries' policy. This is the global trend, right? So the government knew that early childhood is important, so it responded to that. The second aspect was it responded to the changes in the population. You know, we have a falling birth rate. We need more women in the workforce. We need to provide quality care. We need to make sure that the quality of the population is very good, so we need to provide early childhood because of the population change. The government is very responsive to civil society demands in the area of education, because there was a lot of industrial action by the early childhood professionals saying the government isn't doing enough, there are problems with the pre-primary education voucher scheme. So actually, when the government has a scheme, because of accountability, they have to evaluate it in a certain number of years, but they put it forward by 2 years because of the public concern. Or there was public concern in Chinese culture. Certain years are regarded as very auspicious, so we have a lot of babies born in those years, like dragon babies, okay? And what happens is, because it's auspicious year, so there is a real stress on our medical services. Okay, so the government will plan for all this, more doctors, but then we have a lot of babies from mainland, pregnant women from mainland China coming to have the baby in Hong Kong so they get Hong Kong citizenship. So the government has to stop this immediately. So they respond to the citizens.
Yeah.
So that's responsive policy making. The other thing was progressive universalism. I think I alluded to this. Basically, we've moved away from giving equal amounts to everybody to giving based on need. Although we agree that a rising tide will lift all ships, in our small context, it's really important, like children with special needs. They do require more. We just can't give them good instruction. We need to give them sliding scale support. So what has happened is the government has targeted a few groups, special needs, ethnic minority, etc. And of course, you have more than one thing, and they're providing them more support. They're actually, what they're doing is you have, say, many children with special needs in your class, the government will give you more teachers in your kindergarten. They fund it. So this is actually very important.
Thank you. I think very similar things also in Finland in terms of responsive policy making. And we started our conversation regarding how Finland is now changing, and we are increasingly, I think, somebody's again, so we are increasingly considering how we can serve children and families who have just recently moved into our country. And since we offer so many different possibilities for early childhood education and care, center-based services are not the only option. We have home-based care, we have play clubs, we have so many different services available for parents to choose from. So how to counsel, communicate all these different personalized options for families and children who are just recently moved into the country. We really need to pay attention to our communication and consultation strategies so that all these families are aware of the options available. We see this very necessary for continuing a country that has shared values and kind of building again this community ethos so nobody is left behind, and that we can still continue along the road of the Nordic welfare model and based on democracy and everybody knowing their rights and also serving the community and society. If you are not aware how the services work and what is available and what are your kind of needs, this is very difficult to take part in the country, and we want to integrate all people back to our society who are newcomers.
Great. Okay, so Caridad and Linda, you're both doing tremendously important work at the Inter-American Development Bank and at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Caridad, what are your key takeaways from the country cases and this early advantage scheme in terms of applying it to your work?
Yes, hello. Thank you, and thanks for the invitation. It's an honor to be here. I think that in Latin America we've seen a very strong interest in the recent 10 to 15 years on early childhood at the policy level and at the high level of policy, and that is remarkable. One key takeaway from this study for me that has kept me thinking is that we need to pause and reflect, because I think that in this enthusiasm, the region is often trying to replicate what one country is doing in the next one without recognizing the diversity of the local context and the different historical, institutional, administrative context of the different countries. So I think that is very, very challenging, because oftentimes the technical teams at government have very short-term appointments, and they have to deliver something. So the easiest way is to replicate what others are doing. But that's not going to work. And I think that maybe one of the most interesting contributions comes conceptually from the Latin American, if there is such a thing as the Latin American experience these years, is this recognition that we need to switch the way in which we visualize the early childhood system. And instead of seeing it as a set of sectors doing their thing, we need to put families and children on the center and articulate those sectors around their individual needs. Now, how do you operationalize that scheme? How do you translate that vision into something that affects the actual experiences and lives of children and families? I don't think Latin America or any country in Latin America has figured that out yet. So there is really a need to experiment and try different approaches to get to a model that actually responds to that conceptual model that I think is very correct. And I think it is in the process of making these things operational that we need to recognize the local context and the local needs and think more creatively about them, and probably take more time to do changes and reforms.
Great. Linda, I mean, you've been doing a tremendous amount of work on childcare inequality for many years, and now are really zeroing in on financing issues for the Bipartisan Center. What are your key takeaways here?
Is this working? Yeah. Okay. I ended up with a live one. Well, first of all, thank you for having me in I'm so honored to be in this group. I mean, it's an amazing panel and an amazing study, and I urge everyone around the country actually to read this book, because it has a lot of lessons for the United States in it. I'm struck because, I'm working on trying to figure out how we in the United States are going to pay for early care and education. That's the one reason I went to where I am now, and I think that we're stuck until we figure that out in this country. I was struck in the book by some of what was said, and I think we suffer in the United States from the ideal versus the real. In that we know what the ideal is, we don't really have a very good grasp of what's real in our own country. And I say that because in taking apart the pieces of the study that talked about supply versus demand funding, we have focused on one piece of the demand side funding, to be honest with you, and that is the amount of money going into our subsidy program. and looking at the federal government primarily to do that. There are a number of other strategies that the book points out, or the study points out, that are used elsewhere that we use, but I think our early childhood community doesn't recognize that we use. And those are, among others, the tax credits and many of the other types of things that are available. And I bring that up because a year and a half ago or so, we had a debate in this country about our taxes. And I heard many, many people in the early childhood community say, we don't want to engage in that conversation because anything that goes into the tax cuts will then not be available for us over on the other side of the equation, in the discretionary fund side of our funding streams. And in fact, that wasn't true. I mean, look at what happened in that same year. Was the biggest increase in our child care funding ever experienced in the country. So we did not engage in the tax conversation in this country in terms of the financing. And although I don't think a lot of people in our own field understand this, actually, because of some of the interplay between our tax credits, some of our families actually lost ground, not intentionally, but lost ground in the tax side of the equation. So I think when it comes to our community, we need to stand back from the ideal and begin to look at what we really have, what the tools are in this country to use, and then take them on. I think the second thing when it comes to governance, as many of you know, I've spent a lot of time, and Lynn is our idol on the issue of governance and administration, in looking at governance and administration. And I think because of the size of the United States as opposed to these other countries, we have got to do a better job of understanding and do the intersection between our federal and our state policies and governance structures if we're going to make any progress on this. And I think that we have not really taken that on. And so my final comment in this area that pertains to the work I'm doing, and I think, Michael, you said it earlier, was when we don't have the right governance structures, can we look at the functional alignment of some of our programs and our systems? And I think in states where we're not going to make much progress anytime soon in reorganizing our structures, then we do need to take on what I think is within our own ability to influence, and that is some of the functional alignment of systems like inspections and some of the health things that we do. We have opportunities there that I think we might be missing.
Great. Caridad, are you seeing anything in Latin America that you think is particularly relevant on these, on these three issues, these levers that are being implemented differently?
Well, I think that Latin America has done some interesting attempts to rethink the governance part, either through different forms of what Lynn called this boundary spanning efforts. Is that, yes, the word that you developed? And so I think that's been very interesting to see different types of governance structures, either from the central government trying to coordinate vertically and horizontally, or through, for example, data systems to trying to articulate actions of different actors. I think that speaks to the diversity of ways to address the issues. I think it's still a baby step. It's an attempt that needs to be further strengthened and further developed to have actual results on provision and quality of services.
So I want to get everybody into the habit of imagining that they have more resources. And you've all been appointed to a ministerial or a presidential or a global advisory group that actually has the benefit of having an extra $100 million to spend between now and 2024. Thinking about the early advantage and some of the inconvenient truths that Lynn has put forward, where should you start to really get Hong Kong and Finland to be 100% in alignment with the findings from this research? And thinking about the U.S. and the Latin American context, like, where should the investments go next?
I think
Into microphones.
Thank you. I think context really matters, and Lynn articulated this very nicely. Hong Kong has a different system. We have a split system, split governance, split age, everything, but we work well. So if I had money, okay, as much money, I would continue to improve aspects of the system, and the two places I would, actually three things I would invest in. One, I would provide full-day services for all parents that want it, okay? Because right now we only give half-day, free half-day. The second thing is I would invest in the early childhood workforce, because I think that is really, really important. Providing they are workforce, they really want to learn, they just, we need to provide them more funding, we need to provide them. And lastly, I would invest in parent education at the societal level through media programs, because sometimes there is a real disconnect with what parents want for their children, which we honor and we want to respect, but what we're trying to promote in the early years as professionals.
Okay, thank you, Nirmala. I can very much echo what you are saying. I think all those three kind of areas that we would like to invest are very, very important, particularly parents having the right for high quality early childhood education and care, and parents and families and the children. So they need these services and they need to be able to use them. Also workforce, that was my kind of priority, that I wanted to say how much it is important to invest on professional learning and professional competencies. We are talking here a lot about early childhood education teachers and their competencies, but I would also say that in addition to their competencies, we need to look at the professional capacities of people who regulate the policies, who steer the systems. So not only blindly looking, teachers matter and are of course very important, but we need highly capable administrators and policymakers in our systems that can then draw on latest research evidence data. So I would also invest on that kind of professional capacity.
Thank you. I'm struck that neither one of you talked about 0 to 3. So I am interested in hearing from the Latin American and the U.S. context.
On the investment part?
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna invest in a different area. I would put the money into data. Yes, I think we need population-based measures of development that are comparable across countries, across populations within countries, that are frequently published, that make it to the first page of every important newspaper once a year, and they focus the discussion on how we are doing in terms of the development and the well-being of young children, and that hold politicians accountable for their efforts. I would also invest in the generation of systems that nominally track every child and the services he or she accesses, so that we can hold the sectors accountable for what they do and what they do not do. And we can think of comprehensive services in a concrete operational manner that responds to the need of that children and that recognizes the need of that children and his or her family with a direct link and implication to providing. So I would put actually the money on those two pillars of accountability, both for the society and for the system.
Wonderful.
Okay. Will you add a B to that instead of an M?
Sure.
Because in the United States we need about that much, about 100 billion. So with the $100 billion, here's what I think I would invest in. The first thing, I think, to your point, data systems. We really need better data in the United States, and we don't have it, and I think we're going to have to start. We've made several investments, but we just don't have consistent data across this country. I think the second thing I would agree with is the parents and parent education. And I've been giving a lot of thought lately to how we actually, through the Individual with Disability Education Act, created parent centers and really engaged parents in advocacy for their children and understanding what that meant. And we have a very active parent engagement in that sector, and we lack it in the rest of early childhood, and I think we need to invest in that. And then finally, I think quality measurements. I think we struggle with how to measure quality in this country in a consistent way. We've got a number of attempts at quality measurements through things like our quality rating improvement system and some of our things like we do with the class scoring, but we need to do a better job consistently, and I think make it a little bit easier. So an investment in some quality tools that would help people understand what that really means would be helpful to us.
So thank you all. Such a rich set of insights and experiences that I hope has launched an important conversation, a series of conversations about early advantage. Will you please join me in thanking our panelists?
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Wonderful panel. Can I also just indicate, as we're about to take a break, that this panel has been a model panel for how we'd like the next two panels to operate. That is in the high level of the microphone sharing collaborative activity. So thank you very much indeed. Could you just indicate once again your appreciation? Thank you very much.